might have a slightly different approach. I was asked to think about enterprise architecture and the maturity of enterprise architecture and how you drive that into businesses. And as I was thinking about it, I kept coming back to the Wizard of Oz. It might have been bad Christmases, because every single Christmas our family had to watch The Wizard of Oz, because it was my dad's favourite film. So it gave me nightmares, which I still have. This is a personal view on how we can drive maturity into our enterprises using architecture. So, because it's a lot about architecture, and you go on and you carry on speaking, and you go into even more detail, and I thought I'd better put this up. It's not really an agenda, it's just so that when you pass out, you can pretend that you listened all the way through. And it's really, really important that when you set out the aims of your presentation, that they stay fixed in people's minds and they don't get confused because they don't keep changing. They're really important to get right. So, I'm going to be talking in a particular order, but probably this order, about perception, about architecture, about innovation, and reality and maturity is sort of the same thing, because to be mature we have to face up to reality. I have this little thing that really, actually, if we're mature, it just means, as architects, it's about time we grew up and faced the real world. Right, think about perception. We'll think about our perception of ourselves and our company's perception of us. And so I think we tend to like to think of ourselves as the great and mighty Oz, or the way that he thought of himself. And it could be that our organisations think of us as slightly different. This might be because of the way we react to them. And if we want to actually develop and begin to be that great and mighty Oz, then we need to understand the way they think about us and maturely the way we think about them. And let's face it, enterprise architecture is a real problem. People don't understand it. And there are common misconceptions because everybody means different things. So I've picked 4 misconceptions which everybody falls into. And that's another thing you'll find out, you should already know, being architects generalise. It's called abstraction. 4 misconceptions. First one is partly to do with the roots of what we think of as enterprise architecture. That it's all about the technology. Well, that's a nice, comforting place to be because technology is nice and easy to handle. It always does exactly what you want it to do, or perhaps not. But it's not just the business that thinks it's all about the technology. Very often, it's the technologists and architects that think it's all about the technology too. So I want to move that out of the way. It's not. Okay, so it must be about the business. Well, if you were a business architect who's been really pushing into this kind of environment, yes, it's all about the business, but it's not. Business architects tend to feel, I know about the enterprise. I'm good on this. I can tell them what to do. As a real surprise, technologists also tend to think, well, enterprise architecture, it's all about the business. They don't really understand my problems and don't understand what I do or why I do it. It's a trap we both fall into, whether our background is business or our background is technology. It's all about documentation. Why do people think that? Well, because we produce loads and loads of documents. You can tell them just how good an enterprise architecture is by the weight of the documentation you give to your customer. Well, sorry, I'm afraid that's another misconception. You can have as many reports and as many analyses as you like, and it won't make a ha'porth of difference. It's a mature science. We like to think that we know what we're doing. This is being recorded, isn't it? Yes. Of course we do. I'll leave you to fill in the rest there, okay? Another problem with enterprise architecture is it gives us unnatural challenges. Challenges that we don't want to face up to. The business feels that it challenges their supremacy. These people messing around and trying to understand what we do. We're in control. And technical architects, these people messing around, they're trying to stop me doing what I do well. So, enterprise architecture is a problem. These are some of the reasons that it's hard to drive into business. The business doesn't understand it and doesn't want it very often. The technologists don't want it and don't understand it. And you know what? We reinforce that by just giving them loads of reports and giving them edicts. Let's wind back a bit. What is an architect? I think it's quite important to understand, as enterprise architects, what an architect is. So, I went to the fount of all knowledge, the internet. It was Google, really. They came back with some fantastic answers. And I talked through them. The best I could find was an architect is a person who architects. Not terribly helpful. So I delved a bit further and, of course, came up with the other one. The person who creates and understands the architecture. That was about the depth that you could find easily. So, I hate to break this to you, but if that's really correct, then I know what an architect is. It's the person you really don't want. It's a person you really could well do without. If you're the only one who understands, what do you say? You've not changed the enterprise. You've not changed anything. So what do I think an architect is? Now, a couple of you have seen this before, so you'll be bored through this. If I hear any snoring, I'll be upset. An architect is someone who clarifies and simplifies. Somebody who collaborates and communicates. Somebody who enables. I know we like to think of ourselves as the centre of the universe, but actually, your most important job is to allow and enable other people to do their jobs, but more effectively. Especially in enterprise architecture, we bridge those gaps between the customers, between the goals and desires of our companies or our organisations, and between the technology, to make it work more effectively, to be better, to transform the way we think and operate. There we are. That's what we are. We are professional, we're wise, and we can help people do this. It's dead easy. Yeah, and that's how very often we come across. Because because we're professional and wise, we can tell you what to do. So, not only do we have problems communicating, we also are really good at alienating those that we need to work alongside. Quickly about architecture. I'm probably going to run away with it. Quickly about architecture, especially enterprise architecture. It's a different level as enterprise architecture, but architecture is architecture is architecture. What is architecture? Back to my friend. You can probably read this. Architecture is generally considered an art, but it's differentiated by one thing, which is function. So I thought I'd look at some different kinds of architecture. Business architecture, blueprint of an enterprise that enables common understanding. Software engineering, well, software architecture, program or computing or system. But I'm an enterprise service architect, so I was quite interested in what service architecture is. And helpfully, service architecture, best explanation I can find from the Open Group, is an architecture that supports service orientation. Why is it we become so self-referential? Why don't we say what it is we do? Service-orientated architecture, and any architecture really, is a way of describing a solution in terms of real value. And if your architecture, whether you're a technical architect or a business architect or an enterprise architect or a service architect, isn't doing that, then it's not going to fly. Back to Martin Fowler. In the end, the architecture is all the important stuff. There's an echo there, isn't there, of just how important we are and how we should be able to dictate to the business. Let's be real. Architecture is a new discipline. We've got immature language. Like it or not, just because you create an architecture doesn't mean you succeed. And like it or not, the architecture itself is not the point. It's a means to an end. Can we really say that we've got immature language? I thought I'd do a quick talk for a few languages. Back to my visibility. Seemed an appropriate picture because they're talking about stuff. So, architectures. What is the... Well, I was looking at enterprise architectures, and we've got TOGAF, Zachman, NAF, DWP, all sorts of things. But that's a bit restrictive. Don't forget we've got a lot more than that really. We've got business process, so we've been bringing in the business stuff. How about bringing in the software stuff? Boy, we can't have immature languages. We've got so many of them. Interestingly, if you think back to the story of the Tower of Babel, that's just what the story tells us messed us up. Too many languages. Let's look at the history. We think it's not very, we're not very mature. Really started coming about in 1989. I'm going to whip through this really quickly because it's just a history lesson on how these enterprise-focused architectural frameworks came out. They're all very self-referential and cannibalistic and wonderful in their own ways. People have put an awful lot of thought into these frameworks. And I wonder one of us can say we've been in an organisation where these frameworks have had the impact that they should have? Why is it not working? There's a lot of thought here. And these are really, really good. Well, some of them. There are differences between the frameworks. The burnout, IT infrastructure, you know all that. Enterprise architecture is bringing all these together. All this complex world, bringing it together and helping it to communicate and understand one another. That's the only way that we're going to become mature. That's the only way that we're going to drive transformation into our organisations. That's not quite true. You can drive transformation into the organisation in many ways. There's a very few ways that you can drive good transformation. So what's architecture? It's principles, not artifacts. It's understanding the responsibilities. It's understanding the structures. It's understanding the boundaries of those structures, how they fit together, how they communicate together, those interfaces. And it's rules. Yeah, that's all good stuff. All great stuff. Really, most of all, is understanding the context of where you're working. Whether you're working down in the real weeds of embedded programming architecture or up at the level of your enterprise. If you don't understand the context in which you are trying to behave, the context that you are trying to affect, you will do nothing. Apart from maybe a bit of damage. When we understand that, we've got a framework, a skeleton that we can build on. Architecture, no use of consent. We can have the most fantastic architecture. Nobody follows it. For nothing, except spent a lot of money. It's not easy. I'm eternally grateful that it's not easy. Because if it was easy, guess what? Wouldn't need you. It's not a solitary venture. It's quite fitting that we're all together here. Because you cannot architect on your own. And if we begin to think we can, then we're not mature. It's not something that just happens. We seem to feel that at the moment, because of all this new ways of working, agile development, that it's just going to happen. Well, I'm afraid it's not. Agile is a fantastic way of pushing projects forward quickly and understanding the customer's perspective. It's a really bad way of putting together a coherent vision. We need to know, we need to understand how to architect in an agile way. We need to take those wonderful things in agile and make the most of them. Because that's what enterprise architects do, or should do. Okay? Bit controversial. Architecture is not necessary. Things exist anyway. They're going to be there. They're going to build stuff. It's going to happen, whether you have an architecture or not. Just a moment of light relief. Okay? I came across a wonderful house. Some of you may have heard of it. It was owned by the Winchester family. That's right. Guns in America. Not a good subject. But the Winchester House is quite good, especially for architects. Anybody heard of it before? Brilliant. Do you like it?
It's quirky.
It's quirky. That is a word. It started off as about a 4 or 5 bedroom house quite a long time ago. So let's look at it now. It now covers 161 acres. It had 500 rooms. They've been remodeled a bit inside, reshaped. There's only 160 left. It's got 10,000 windows. That seems quite a lot of windows for that number of rooms, to be honest. But it has 10,000. It is too many. Some of them open into other rooms. But that's quirky. That's okay. It's got 2,000 doors. That might seem a bit of an overkill for 160 rooms, but it's all right. 65 of them open onto blank walls. So that's solved that bit of the problem. There is at least one which is a little severe on the last step as you go out of the house, because there's a 12-foot drop to the ground. Interestingly, over what looks to be a driveway, so as well as falling out, you could get run over, so that's good. It's got 47 fireplaces, so some of those rooms are a bit cold, but to go with those, it's got 17 chimneys. Unfortunately, some of those have no purpose because they're not connected to a fireplace, or they don't actually reach the roof. But they have the idea. It's got 40 staircases. You could get lost in this place, but you need to be a bit careful because actually 13 of them don't go anywhere. There is one really famous one that does go somewhere, which is called the switchback staircase. It's got 7 flights of stairs in it. It's got 44 stairs, and it raises 9 feet. Each stair is less than 2 inches high. It's got 52 skylights. Great. 24 of those are in floors. It's taken 38 years of round-a-day construction, with plans changing on a daily basis. Now you might begin to see echoes of your enterprise. They've worn out 147 builders so far. I think they've stopped now, actually. And, unsurprisingly, they have the grand total of no architect. It's a really good illustration. Would you build a house that way? No. Why do we build enterprises then? Bigger is better. It's going to perform better. It's going to be more powerful, more effective, because there's more of it. Well, there's a lot of that. It doesn't seem very effective. Let's go back to that. Architecture is not necessary. It's not necessary. Unfortunately, it's inevitable. Everything has an architecture. Really doesn't matter whether we understand that architecture or not, it has one. Actually, it's quite useful to understand it, because, well, arguably, essentially, if you're going to transform it, knowing what it is improves the design. It improves your chances of success. Architecture is fear. Well, it is, because if you're engaged in any kind of architecture, you have to explore, you have to find out. That's your F. It's an acrostic, really, I'm sorry. You have to examine. You're not going to understand without examining what's there. You have to articulate or assess. I couldn't decide between those, really. Examining and assessing, that sort of similar. But if you have found something and you've analysed it and you've understood it and you've not articulated it, sorry, you're not behaving like an architect. Another thing I do actually find difficult to do is actually recognising the architecture. The number of architectures that I have seen presented at high-level meetings that is an implementation. What's the point of that? It's not taught us anything. You could have gone and looked at it. They've not understood anything about it. And we fall into the same traps. Too often, as we're talking about architecture, we're not talking about those principles. We're not talking about what's driving or why it's there. We're talking about what's there. If we really, hurry up a lot now, if we're really mature, then what we're trying to do is box the innovation. Box in that magic. I'm going to skip over these because you can read them later. Because innovation actually can't be constrained. We try to put it in a framework, but sorry, it doesn't work. You put a butterfly in a bottle, it's dead. And we do the same with our architectures. It's like nailing jelly to the wall. I'll skip over this as well because you've got to be able to find pictures of jelly being nailed to the wall on the internet. Actually, the jelly baby doesn't look too happy about it. But in the DWP, we've been nailing it to the wall in an architectural model. But it's okay because we don't treat it too seriously. We identify what's there, we identify why it's there, and we identify the fact that none of this can happen in isolation. Because otherwise we're not transforming the enterprise, we're transforming a little bit that may not make a difference. So, I'm going to skip over this as well, because you can read this, but it's quite important. Enterprise architecture will help you structure innovation through your maturity, not through any model. You've got to be determined to learn. You've got to accept that you are going to be wrong. You've got to realise that others have invaluable skills that you need, and you've got to embrace openness and respect. Start in your enterprise where people are keen. But you're going to need them. We've got another acrostic. Decide to share. Allow for disruption. Recognise where benefit lies. Expect things to change and evolve. And share the glory with those who make it happen. If you're not doing those things, you are not being mature, and your enterprise architecture will not be mature. It'll be your idea, not what we need. I'm nearly there. So, let's follow this up. This is all about maturity as architects. Because as architects, if we are not mature, we cannot drive maturity into our enterprise architecture, and we cannot drive transformation, which is why we want to do the enterprise architecture. That maturity, because we undermine ourselves by promising everything that might be possible, rather than what we think is probable. We get tied up because we find something really interesting. Well, I'm sorry, not everybody does. And it's those customers in our business and outside our business, they need to find what we're doing interesting, otherwise nothing's going to change. We love the detail. No, this isn't an architect, is it? I found myself rearranging the cups in the cupboard the other day because how can you put different types of cup together? Yeah, it's just a foible. I had to rearrange it. And we think the architecture is the reason we're there. No, it's not. The reason you're there is that your board and your management think that you understanding and communicating the architecture will make a difference. Flip quickly over these because you can read them later. Promise to stakeholders what you can deliver. These are key messages. for ensuring that we produce and drive transformation and maturity in our architectures and our organisations. Promise what you can deliver. Begin with their aims, listen to their fears, understand their hopes, speak their language, test their ideas, because they may be better than yours, and encourage their participation. Because if they don't feel part of it, they won't buy into it, and it will not happen. Perhaps most of all, remember to be humble. That's a hard thing for an architect, because we're always right, aren't we? Another hard thing for an architect, forget about your agenda. You need to hold on to your vision, you need to explain your ideas, you need to address the risks, not just that you perceive, but that your customers in your business perceive. And you have to remember, on every occasion, you are interfering in their lives. As an enterprise architect, your vision is to transform that business into something better, which means changing their environment. That is scary. And if we don't recognise it, we won't be mature enough to understand their reaction. So show them you care. Step away from the detail. The architect, I love to explore the detail. I get really carried away with detail because a good architecture is beautiful, and it should be. We're comforted by that. We delight in the intricate complexity of it. But unfortunately, we're wrong. Most people don't care. So step back from the detail and tell your customers what they need to hear, as long as it's true. It's difficult because some of the things they need to hear, they don't want to hear. And if you've not been mature and you've not built up that rapport by understanding them and trusting them and believing in them, they won't believe in you. And understand that EA is a tool. It is not the goal. It's a very good tool. It's very underused. It's a very powerful tool. But it is not the goal. And we should not be protecting it. It's big enough to stand up for itself. We need to get away from this dictatorial attitude and start discussing and persuading. And yet, I'm very nearly over now. You've got to accept your fate, because you can look around this room and you realise that your compatriots on this journey, another good reason. You know, I've never been one to step away from a theme just because it's not working. The people working with you are odd because they're different to you. And it's a good job they are, because if they were all the same as you, we'd never get your answer. What happened to Dorothy? Do you remember? The wizard let her down. She failed in her quest. She couldn't go back to Canada because the wizard couldn't do anything. But she found out that she had a solution with her all along. It was ruby slippers. It's important. We're in a similar situation. We've got a scary bunch of collaborators that we've got to keep on signing, we've got to work with. We've got a pair of ruby slippers. Well, no, we might not have a pair of ruby slippers. But we do have the answer. And that is collaborate, respect, understand, and be a visionary. Be mature in your attitude to your customers, and you will be able to drive maturity into your enterprise architecture. Try it. Believe, and go forward, and you will carry the business with you, so long as you have worked with them and respected them. Not terribly technical, that. So thank you, Randy.